All right, EDU 304. Let's go ahead and get into Enneagram number 2 today, which is labeled the helper. And what we're going to do is we're going to enter the heart triad with Enneagram numbers 2, 3, and 4. And on that spectrum of health to unhealth, let's take a look at how number 2 might be characterized. A healthy 2 is often generous in their efforts to love well and care for other people. They have appropriate boundaries that they're able to draw between themselves and others. And they know what is theirs to do and what is not theirs to do in terms of helping other people. At the average, kind of in the middle of the spectrum here, 2s can be generous, although often consciously or subconsciously expect something in return for their efforts of help. They have poor boundaries. They only know themselves in relation to other people. And at the severe unhealthy end, 2s can become codependent upon others, and in their desire to be loved, they will accept almost any substitute, whether that be appreciation, neediness, or companionship. And so, again, as we move through this, you are naturally going to be thinking these two questions. Is what Berg is describing reflective of me and my personality? And also, who in my relational world does this kind of sound like, or who might be, kind of swing to this number on the Enneagram? If we think about number 2 as the helper, it seems kind of ironic that their deadly sin would then be described as pride, but let's unpack that a little bit. Because 2s are so eager to help meet the needs of other people, they appear to be selfless rather than self-inflated, but their pride reveals itself in the way that they focus their attention and their energy on meeting the needs of others, but giving the impression that they themselves do not need that in return. They relish the myth of their own indispensability. And so oftentimes the motivating factors that are prompting 2s to become the helpers that they are is to cover some insecurity that they themselves might actually need help from others at some point in their lives. Terror, or fear is the dominant emotion in a 2's life. Now, what do we mean by that? They fear that acknowledging their wants or their desires might end in humiliation, or that directly asking someone to fulfill their needs might lead to rejection. And so this idea of helping is closely tied or motivated by a 2's fear that if they're not seen as someone who is helpful and considerate, then they may be rejected from the group or the relationship or whatever. Their decision to help often comes with unspoken strings attached, quid pro quo type of a deal. I don't know if you yourself experience this, or there's somebody in your relational world where they're eager to give you of themselves and help out. And maybe it's moving things, maybe it's setting up for some kind of event that you might have, maybe it's time and attention during a rough patch in your life. But there's this unspoken, non-verbally communicated expectation that then you would reciprocate that in some way, or that you would make up for that by giving that number 2 something that they desire emotionally as well. 2s can be unaware that they possess these unstated expectations or ulterior motives. And isn't that the theme in so many of these Enneagram numbers? That it seems clear to us on the outside, but often when we're the person who's battling with this inside, we're unable to see it. And so again, as we think about the purpose of the Enneagram in an assessment class, it's that self-assessment piece. How are we able to truthfully gauge our understanding, our knowledge, our behaviors, our motivations, and sort of take those blinders off so that these unintentional or subconscious habits of mind and behavior are things that we can begin to recognize so that when we move into an unhealthy direction, we can sort of change course and hopefully revert back to a more healthy state of being. The resentment of a 2 can rise when helping behaviors are not reciprocated by others. Naturally, the talk style of a 2 is help and advice. They have an uncanny ability to sort of innately sense what other people are feeling, often without even asking. I don't know if there are people in your life who can sort of just read a room. Like they can walk into even an unfamiliar situation and they can immediately sense if there's tension or anger, or if it's relaxed, or if it's humorous, or if there's a certain person who's upset but trying to hide it. I don't have this skill or this blessing, but my wife does. And so there are often things that she will say to me that she recognizes about people in our relational world that I was oblivious about. But she has just this kind of gut instinctual ability to recognize and to read the temperature of a room. The problem that 2s need to recognize is that not everybody that they encounter who needs help from them actually wants help. And so maybe you know people in your life who they're constantly dating the person who is an emotional or financial or physical wreck because that person needs them. But you can see from the outside that that person might need them, but they don't necessarily want the help. And so 2s have to be careful to guard their hearts from seeing people that they're in relationship with as projects for them to help or redeem in some way. And as I mentioned with my wife, oftentimes 2s assume that other people possess this same ability to discern the feelings and needs of other people. And so again, I remind you that we all view and experience and react to the world based on our personality, based on our worldview, on the glasses that we put on, based on our Enneagram number. And we react to events in our lives in certain ways, and our expectation is that other people would react in the same way. But not everybody in our relational world is the same number as us, and so naturally they're going to react in different ways. And that's where conflict and misunderstanding can arise when, as an Enneagram 2, in conflict with an Enneagram 8, we both are looking to handle things in different ways. Or we're looking for the other person in the relationship to react in the way that we would react, but their gut reaction is to react in a very different way. So again, the benefit of studying all 9 of these numbers, even though we're naturally only going to be 1 or 2 of them, is that when we come into conflict or we come into crisis with friends, relatives, students, teachers, parents in our relational world who are different numbers than we are, we will be better able to step back, try to gauge what number, what personality they might fit into, and then adjust our approach to meet their needs rather than responding instinctually in the way that we think they need, if that makes sense. Again, in childhood, these are often stereotypical types of stories, but I do think they're helpful in just illustrating some of these early experiences. 2s are usually very sociable children. They're helpers. They want to, they are innately recognize emotions of other people. They want to engage with others. But because they're worried that no one is going to want them, they'll try to buy in some way or maintain love by giving away maybe a favorite toy or a food item at lunch or something like that. I've come into this contact with this recently with my own children and some of their friends. And there's this one couple that we're very good friends with, and every time we'll take our kids over to their house, and we'll have dinner, we'll hang out, we'll watch a game or something, and 3 or 4 hours later we'll be leaving, and one of my kids will have one of our friends' toys in their hands as they're heading out to the car, and I have to stop and say, whoa, 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 that's not our toy. And my son, who's 7, will say, "Well, I know, Dad, but our friend, I won't name their name. She was adamant that I take this with me. Like she said that she wanted to give it to me, and I tried to say no. I tried to say no, but she said that she really wanted me to have it." Now, I don't know at this early stage necessarily if I can label this friend's daughter as a number 2. She's only 6 or 7 years old, but it does illustrate this idea that there's a reason behind, even in early childhood, there's a motivation behind the decisions and the actions and the behaviors that kids make. Oftentimes, 2s in childhood can adopt the role of the people pleaser, and they can adapt their behavior and their image to what others want. They're not as quite as adept at this as number 3s will be, who are the performers, who can literally become any persona that they think is what people want. But 2s are willing and able to adapt their speech and their behaviors even in different contexts based on what they think is desirable for the people that they're surrounded by. In relationship, 2s are the most interpersonal number on the Enneagram, meaning that they are dependent upon relationships with others. And even though they're the ones that are usually doing the helping, there is this dependence upon others in order for 2s to feel like they're successful in being the helpers that they feel they need to be. Oftentimes they find their identity in relationships. I don't know if you've ever come across somebody who's actually introduced themselves to you, not by their own name or their own identity, but in relation to somebody else. So somebody introduces themselves and they say, "Hey, it's nice to meet you. I'm Andy's friend," or "I'm Matt's brother," rather than actually identifying themselves based on their own name and who they are personally. This is just a characteristic of 2s who, because they identify with their relationships with others, they have trouble removing themselves alone and standing alone without those relationships. Oftentimes 2s in the professional circuit are not interested or as interested in other numbers as other numbers are in climbing the professional ladder, because they want to just sort of help everybody. And if they become the boss, then that changes the dynamics of the relationship a little bit. And so oftentimes they're just content to enter an organization at the ground level and kind of stay there. And that's a comfortable space for them throughout the entirety of their career. Also, in terms of career, jobs that are most fitting for Enneagram number 2s are any position where there's a lot of people, a lot of community, a lot of team, a lot of contact with others. In terms of stress and security, and I'll try to adjust this a little bit because I see, don't want to cut off Dr. McCoy down there. In times of stress, number 2s naturally move towards the unhealthy end of 8s, or challengers. They can actually become very demanding and controlling. Maybe manipulative is a better word, trying to manipulate others based on their helping nature. They might blame other people for what makes them unhappy, and can even become vengeful about wrongs they've experienced in the past. In times of security, Enneagram 2s can actually move to the healthy end of 4s, which are classified as romantics, and that they're okay with not having to pretend that they love everybody, and they're able to invest in themselves by doing creative things that bring them joy, not necessarily feeling obligated to find joy in necessarily helping everyone else. As you might anticipate, counselors, nurses, people involved in religious counseling, and certainly teachers, those are careers that sort of lend themselves to the helping type of, actually they're called helping careers oftentimes. And these are the types of careers that lend themselves to someone who is an Enneagram 2. All right, we'll go ahead and leave it there for today. I will see you again soon for Enneagram number 3.